President Trump has given President Putin a 2-week deadline. Well, sort of, anyway. He appears to have set a 2-week deadline. And we've seen how President Trump and deadlines don't seem to go well together. So don't hold your breath for that. But at least that's what he's saying today. And to try to help us make sense of what this is going to look like on the Russian side of this, especially, and how it's going to be viewed over there, we have the ever popular Larry the Shirt Johnson, former CIA analyst, and the guy who runs. It's always great. I tried one. I don't know if everybody remembers, but I tried one time to match Larry the Shirt Johnson with my own shirt like that. It didn't work well for me. So I came off looking pretty bad. So it works well for Larry.
You look marvelous.
But anyway, I just can't reach up to that standard. Let's take a look at some of this, Larry, because too many times, and one of the big reasons, too many times in the West, when you talk about the media, they only give one side of stuff, which is one of the reasons we started this channel in the first place, because we want to see what everybody has to say. And then people can make up their minds when they accurately know what everybody's saying and thinking. One of the most recent examples is that you hear almost ad nauseum in the West from Western leaders, from really a whole host of people, that Russia has been having this murderous offensive capability, this long-range missile strikes into Ukraine for no military reason, and they're just killing people for no reason, oblivious to the fact that it's a back and forth, that Moscow's being attacked routinely at the same time Russia's spending, but they only talk about it as though only Russia's firing missiles and, well, those bad people. So one of the reasons we're grateful to have you on, because you're really tied into a lot of the Russian stuff. Yeah, that one, that's there. That's what nobody in the West is talking about at all. We had to look hard to find this video. At least it was on the Sun website, but it's not. I haven't seen it on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, any of those folks. So ABC News, fill in the blank. But you, on the other hand, bring a balance to things, and why whitewash anything coming in from the Russian side, but you also don't leave it out, and that's what we want to do here. So I want to start, first of all, let's look at what this issue, that headline there about what Trump was saying. Here is what he actually said in the White House just yesterday.
Do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently, but it'll take about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
So let's look at a couple of things he said there. The first question is, he asked, does Putin want an end of, does he want a peace treaty with this? Does he want to end the war? And Trump says, well, I don't know. We'll have to find out. What do you say on just that first point? Does Putin actually want a negotiated settlement to the war?
Negotiated on Putin's terms that he's laid out. That, number one, Ukraine's got to withdraw from all Russian territory and stop attacking it. Number two, Ukraine's got to stay out of NATO. And in fact, NATO itself has to declare that it's no longer going to pursue pushing itself to the east, particularly trying to bring in Moldova or Georgia. That the rights of the Russian speakers in Ukraine are protected and that they are respected. He's had those issues laid out since June 14th, has not deviated from it 1 inch. Well, actually, I'm mistaken. He's starting to deviate, only the deviation isn't to retreat. He's expanding the demand. So instead of requiring Ukraine to vacate Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, he's probably going to add in there Mykolaiv, Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy perhaps, Poltava. So he's going to keep adding on, not backing down. There is zero leverage that the West has over Putin. Putin and the Russians are fed up. They have reached their limit with the West. They're not going to be fooled into negotiations anymore. So this notion that Trump he's delusional in the sense that he pretends that he's a neutral observer in this. Like, good Lord, I don't know why these people are fighting. He's the damn person that has helped cause this. He brags, I sent javelins to Ukraine. It criticizes Obama for just sending blankets. Now, that kind of disconnect. Dude, if I am supplying ammunition to somebody on the street that has a gun and they end up killing people, guess what? I'm an accessory to murder, as is Trump.
So, and it, I mean, we could go down that one for a long, and I'm going to circle back around to that because it's related to something else we're going to talk about. But in this list you just gave, you said, yeah, Putin is interested in a negotiated end to the war on his terms. And then you listed off a list of them. The first one you listed there is that the Ukraine side would withdraw from all the territories that Russia has annexed in 2022. And that seems to be, that alone, we could stop right there because that is basically a non-starter. Here's what Zelensky said on that just recently in the media. It doesn't matter what is written into ultimatums if we are not just talking about a piece of paper, but about something that could lead to a first step, a ceasefire. I think that even at the highest levels, the United States will not support Ukraine's withdrawal from the territories that Ukraine currently holds. So he seems to be saying right there at the top that I'm not even going to exceed to point one on your list. Now, then there's the question that needs to be reframed to President Trump. Does Ukraine want peace? Because it seems to me the answer is no.
Yeah, well, Ukraine, either they accept these terms or Russia will take it to them militarily. They will be defeated. They'll be faced with unconditional surrender, period. There's no gray area here. Russia's not going to let this thing fester. They let it fester. You know, this whole process started really 26 years ago, 1999. In earnest, but that's when Putin came to power, first as prime minister and then named as president, in the midst of a NATO expansion and Central Intelligence Agency backed Islamic insurgents attacking Russia. The United States was backing and supporting terrorists, and over the course of the last 26 years, Putin's had to bite his lips, bite his cheeks, build up his force, rebuild the Russian economy, and to the point that now they're strong enough that they can stand up to us to stop this. And he can go back time after time after time of betrayals and lies by the West. And so they're not going to play that game anymore. And so they're very clear on what the demands are. They talked about the root causes. One of the root causes to this is the insistence on NATO expanding to the east. And if your viewers haven't had a chance to ever see it, they should go back, go to YouTube, look up the Putin interviews by Oliver Stone. It was premiered on Showtime in 2016. It's a 4-part series. Watch that. That will tell you everything you need to know about Putin's mentality, about the situation Russia has faced over the years, and how it's going to deal with this situation. The one thing that comes across is Putin, unlike Trump, is not an emotional teenager. He's not going with these outbursts. Oh, he's crazy. He did this for no reason. And then he admits, in response, Trump admits in response to a question from one of the reporters, well, didn't you hear that Putin, there was an assassination attempt on Putin with Ukrainian drones? And Trump, no, I didn't hear that. Maybe that could be a reason. You think? You think, Donald? I mean, the reality is Trump is being kept in the dark, I think deliberately misinformed by his staff. Either that or he's lying. There's no middle ground here. The bombardment that the Russians started on May 24th, in the course of the 2 days, 24th, 25th, they did over 548 drones and 83 ballistic missiles that attacked Ukraine. In the previous 7 days, Ukraine launched over 1,400 drones into Moscow. So this was clearly Moscow reacting. And with respect to the charge by the Ukrainians and by Trump stupidly saying so, that he's tired of Russia killing these civilians, out of 548 drones fired, out of 83 ballistic missiles, a grand total of 30 civilians, according to Ukrainian sources, not Russian sources, died. Now, I'm not trying to minimize the death of 30 people, but if Russia fires 548 drones and 83 ballistic missiles, and they only kill, 30 civilians, and their intent was to kill civilians, they're terrible shots. Man, they need to work on their marksmanship. But the fact of the matter, that wasn't the case. The ones who are attacking civilians and civilian targets are the Ukrainians.
And I want to point out something. This is from this is a couple hours ago. No, I'm sorry. This is a couple of days ago. Zelensky tweeted out on X, rather, over 900 drone attacks launched against Ukraine in just 3 days, along with ballistic and cruise missiles. There is no military logic in this, but it is a clear political choice of Russia, the choice to continue waging war. He didn't mention anything about the, whatever the number is, you said over 7 days that were fired from Ukraine, 1,400 into Russia. Kind of left that part out there. But this is part and parcel to what the West does, that they only talk about half the equation as though, those darn Russians are just war-mongering, war-loving people, and we're just sitting here wanting peace. But there's no truth to that. And as I've said on an earlier show today, that works for the Western audience. It certainly works for some, anyway, of the Ukrainian audience. But what it doesn't work for is the reality on the ground. What is when these kind of things keep happening? What do you think that this does for the prospects that there can be a negotiated end to the war?
Oh no, I don't think there's not going to be a negotiated end in the sense of that you got two sides with each a position. They're going to have to make compromises and concessions. No, this is going to be von Paulus surrendering outside of Stalingrad. This is being done. Donitz, the German admiral who was the successor to Adolf Hitler, signing the peace agreement with the Russians, the Americans, and the Brits. This is going to be a defeat. Ukraine's not going to have any other options left, and the West, they can keep trying to prop them up, and this is just delusional nonsense.
Well, and I'm sorry, I got to add this because it's so perfectly according to what you're saying right now. Talk about delusional nonsense. This was from a couple of hours ago. Zelensky comes out and says, you know what, there's probably not going to be any real peace in this situation until Putin's gone. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I didn't. But are these people crazy? Do they not listen or follow Medvedev's tweets?
Too many people don't listen to Medvedev because they say, oh, he's just a blowhard. He doesn't mean anything that he says. And so I'm talking about people who are intelligent. I talk to here in Washington, D.C., and they just don't listen to anything he says.
Yeah, they all ask the question, if Putin is killed or dies, who replaces Putin? Casper Milquetoast? That's not going to happen. Medvedev would be the most likely successor since he has been president. And I think the technical term is hard ass. He's not. There is widespread criticism of Putin for being too soft.
Yes, yeah,
too slow.
I read about that a lot.
And but as you go back and again watch those interviews with Oliver Stone, you understand he is a very thoughtful, patient person. He's learned. He's been bamboozled by the West over time, and he's learned some lessons from it, some hard lessons. But they're going to see this through to the end. And like I said, he's laid out the conditions, June 14th, 2024, and those nobody's varied from them. I heard the same thing from Sergei Lavrov when I was with him in early March of this year. So, what's taking place though right now is the panic in the West is growing, because the offensive of the Russians is accelerating dramatically. They're taking 4 or 5 villages a day.
On that point there, it would seem to be almost contradictory, because you talk about the West being in a panic. If they recognize the reality of what you just said there about the acceleration and the taking those villages, which I've seen reported elsewhere also. But then at the same time, I don't know if this just falls back into that delusional category, but you had Friedrich Merz, the new chancellor of Germany, a couple of days ago say, hey, you know what? We're going to remove all restrictions on the use of the Storm Shadow, the ATACMS, and our own Taurus missiles, etc. Scout, perhaps from France. All that's coming off, he said. And so we're going to be firing deeper into Russia to put more pressure and force Putin to come to terms that we agree with. And I think that was this morning. I think it was this morning, or maybe it was yesterday afternoon. Somebody asked Peskov, what do you think about that?
Мерц уже не только в очередной раз подтверждает, что у Украины нет больше никаких ограничений по дальнобойным орудиям. Он на пресс-конференции с Зеленским заявил о финансировании Германией производства дальнобойных ракет на Украине для того, чтобы она могла применять эти ракеты дальнобойные там, где она считает нужным, в том числе за пределами своей территории.
В данном случае мы видим, как Германия соревнуется с Францией в первенстве по дальнейшему провоцированию войны. Все эти действия, естественно, мешают мирным усилиям. Мы надеемся, что, несмотря на такие провокационные действия и на все препятствия, все-таки удастся продолжить процесс урегулирования, удастся провести второй тур переговоров, обменяться меморандумами, проектами меморандумов, о которых условились. Иначе охарактеризовать вот эти действия Германии невозможно, к сожалению.
Oops, sorry, we forget to pull that off.
Yeah.
You probably also saw that one of the senior members of the Duma was a lot more aggressive than Peskov was. He was very measured, as he always is. He said if Germany fires these missiles to harness into Russia and they hit anything, we should consider firing back into Germany itself, not just somewhere else in Ukraine. How do you read those two comments there? Because for me, first of all, looking at Peskov, body language says, yeah, I ain't worried about that. But then the anger on the, I don't know if this is part of the Dmitry Medvedev branch of the Russian government, but he took a much harder, hawkish line. How do you read those two statements?
Well, it wasn't just Medvedev and that one member of the Duma. There was also another retired general. It's important to understand that there is a strategic difference between the Taurus on the one hand and the ATACMS and Storm Shadows on the other. My understanding is that the Taurus actually can carry a nuclear warhead. So from Russia's standpoint, any Taurus fired at it, they have to assume that it's a nuke. They don't want to sit there and, well, sure hope it ain't. And so what they've made clear is they will go after the launch site and the people that supplied that missile, if Mertz and company are stupid enough to do this. Now, I think Mertz is getting reined in a little bit, where some sanity will come. But the Russians, they're not playing on this front, and the West does not have enough ATACMS or Storm Shadows or Taurus missiles, for that matter, to make any kind of tactical difference on the battlefield. And I do notice, I congratulate one of your commenters, who are commenting on this as it's going along. They go, Fred Mertz, wasn't that Ethel's husband on Lucy and Ricky's show?
Oh, man.
And ding, 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 we have a winner.
They're about the same intellectual capacity, it appears. I don't know. But,
Fred Mertz was smarter. You look, why this Friedrich Mertz is doing this. BlackRock is, man, they're threatening to put his head in a vice, because BlackRock's got a lot of money on the line here. And if they don't do something quick to stop the Germans from taking all the property that BlackRock has bought, which which Russia is doing, then, oh my God, the BlackRock's going to suffer a major financial hit. And Friedrich Mertz, former Blackwater boy, he's going to be on the hook for that. That's why he's doing this. No other reason. It's about the money.
Yeah, but that's not going to get them any money. That's all that's going to do is get them shot. But,
yeah.
Well, like you said, the intelligence seems to be detached somewhere in there. But back onto the other side of the equation. Even now, at least as of now, I think that I don't remember if it was when we had you on last week, but speaking of Dmitry Medvedev, he said in a speech, I think it was on Monday, that this is the last chance for peace. He said, this is the last opportunity there's going to be. And apparently that's not completely out yet because yesterday, Sergei Lavrov, whom you mentioned that you've met with recently, said that we were getting ready to exchange some memorandums between Ukraine and Russia, and the next set of meetings is set for Monday the 2nd. Here's how he put it.
Тогда же в Стамбуле было условлено о том, что Москва и Киев подготовят документы, излагающие позицию каждой из сторон для достижения устойчивого урегулирования. Российская сторона, как и договаривались, оперативно разработала соответствующий меморандум, который излагает нашу позицию по всем аспектам надежного преодоления первопричин кризиса. Наша делегация во главе с Владимиром Мединским готова представить этот меморандум делегации Украины и дать необходимые пояснения в ходе второго раунда возобновленных прямых переговоров в Стамбуле в ближайший понедельник, 2 июня.
So what's going to happen here? These memorandums are going to be exchanged if they haven't already. They're going to meet on Monday, but you just laid out there what almost certainly is in that memorandum, point by point, and we can certainly guess what's in the Ukraine memorandum. That's going to be, we get everything and you run away and hide. Something version of that. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but probably not by much. So given that they're going to be that far apart, which may be further apart than they were in their first meeting, what is that going to mean after these meetings?
Well, the Ukrainians are also playing some games with this. So Zelensky is out late yesterday, earlier today, complaining that the Russians haven't given them their memorandum. Well, Ukraine gave its memorandum to the United States, and before it is given it to Russia. The way this was supposed to work is supposed to be between Russia and Ukraine. And the Russians made clear, hey, when we sit down to meet, we'll give you the memorandum. So they're going to lay out the position, and Ukraine will not accept it. They will reject it. And meanwhile, Russia's not stopping on the battlefield. You've done a great job over the last week laying out all of what's taking place on the front lines, all along the line of contact. And the Russians, they haven't even hit third gear yet, but they're rolling along, and they're moving to close. Create a variety of, several different cauldrons up and down the line, this enclosure, encirclement of Ukrainian troops. And these key positions start to fall one after another. And it's just, it's a matter of time. I think the former, or I guess the head of the SBU in Ukraine, his prediction 4 months ago was that if there wasn't something happened immediately, either on the negotiation front or getting dramatic reinforcements and supplies, that Ukraine would lose by end of June. And I think they were genuinely headed in that direction.
And let's look at that examination, that point a little bit closer. So we started this with Trump saying that here in a couple of weeks, we'll know if I'm being tapped along or whatever. Well, we already know that. We don't have in the definition he gives to being tapped along, i.e. not doing what Trump wants. So that's not going to happen. You just talked about it. You laid out the conditions that Ukraine will reject them. So that's going to only leave the military card left over. Now, if Trump means what he says, and that's obviously up for debate because he hadn't meant what he said on any of the other deadlines that he put out there. But at some point, he will have to be forced into making a decision. Either I'm going to do nothing and I'm going to walk, or I'm going to escalate and put more ammunition and weapons, which many in the West are wanting. But it doesn't seem to me that Trump's going to do that. I don't see we're even just taking all the external modalities out of it and just what does he personally get out of something, which is a big driver. He doesn't get anything out of doing nothing. So do you see him finally walking in a couple of weeks if it works out the way you think it does on Monday?
I think there'll be one more conversation between Trump and Putin. And Trump may start off, hey, what are you doing? Why are you acting so crazy? And Vladimir Putin, in a very calm way, will say, well, Mr. President, apparently you haven't been properly informed, and your staff has not told you what it really preceded this. And he'll lay it out in a very rational process. And then he'll say, they tried to assassinate me. And so you and I share something in common. We've both had people trying to kill us. Trump's going to go, you make a really good point. And he'll come out of there going, well, I've got some new information, and understand why Russia's doing what it's doing, and then the pressure will be back on Zelensky. But the situation is going to change significantly in the next 2 weeks, and not in a way that it's going to weaken Russia. That's the thing that people that keep desperately hoping. And I caught Jack Keane on Fox a little bit today. Boy, was he whining. You know how bad it was?
Napa Valley. What did he say?
Napa Valley called and said they're going to name a new vineyard the Jack Keane Vineyard because he's such a big whiner.
What did he say this time?
Oh, Russia's not playing fair, and Russia's accelerating, and it was on and on about how, oh my God, this is they're just stringing Trump along. Trump needs to crack down on
Crack down. Did he not pay any attention in the previous administration? They tried to crack down every day, and the crackdown broke on its own efforts there. I don't know. I'm okay. Going down a path that probably shouldn't be going down here. Last question I want to ask you on this before we shift gears into something else, though. How do you see Putin reacting to this on the battlefield? Is he? Let's say that what happens in the next couple of weeks is exactly what we expected to happen, almost like it can't be any other different way. Does he just finally say, all right, we're not even going to talk peace anymore. Now I'll see you at the presidential palace in Kiev in person when we get there? Or how do you see him taking place in terms of that on the battlefield?
No, he's legitimately playing chess. And so he's not going to close any door, but he's not going to stop on the battlefield. The commanders have full authority to proceed with the attack and to carry out the plan that the general staff have designed and are implementing. At the same time, he's going to pursue diplomatic options, but without surrendering Russia's rights and sovereignty. And not just an agreement for agreement's sake, but something that fundamentally deals with, as he calls it, the root causes, which is putting an end to NATO, basically. NATO's got to stop this mobilization against Russia, stop trying to interfere and carry out color revolutions in countries on Russia's border. And it hasn't been done just on the west side. It's been done on the south side too. So, he's going to pursue, he can actually, he's one of those guys that can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Oh, so he's not a Western official. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to shift gears here a little bit and go into another area I know you have a lot to say about and a lot of knowledge about, and that is in the Middle East. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the ground there, so you're really qualified to talk about this. I want to stick, though, with Friedrich Merz, because he also had some things to say here. Now, in this particular case, I find myself agreeing with him a lot, and it's taken no shortage amount, and I got to give credit where it's due. He took a lot of political courage for him to say this, because he, unlike anybody else in the West and a major figure, actually is taking Israel to task on Gaza.
Is this moment a turning point in relations between Israel and one of its closest allies?
What the Israeli army is now doing in the Gaza Strip, I no longer understand, frankly, what its objective is. To cause such suffering to the civilian population, as has increasingly been the case in recent days, can no longer be justified as a fight against Hamas terrorism. When lines are crossed where international humanitarian law is now really being violated, then Germany, the German Chancellor, must also say something about it.
So Germany, because of their Holocaust past, has just almost been even more deferential to Israel over the years than even the United States has, which takes some doing. What do you make of this pretty stark change between Merz and Schultz?
It is... I think that I give him credit for being genuinely alarmed by it. One of the other sort of may have helped push this along is Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister. He came out yesterday, day before yesterday, condemning what Netanyahu's government doing as genocide. I mean, he labeled it a war crime. So here you have a prominent former leader of Israel saying that. So, I think that emboldens people like Mertz to, suddenly weigh in on this. I think there's growing public opinion in Germany because, number one, they've got a significant Muslim population, both out of primarily coming from Turkey, but from some other regions. So there's actually some political, there's not a big Jewish population anymore in Germany. And so despite the Holocaust past, there is popular support in Germany in favor of the Palestinian cause. So I think he's recognizing that as something he has to pay attention to.
Now, this is coming actually on the heels of about a week ago, another very unusual thing in the West where it was, I believe, France, Canada, and the UK leaders had a joint statement, which were also taking Netanyahu to task. Now, in that particular one, Netanyahu came out firing with both barrels.
Yeah.
Just days after France, the UK, and Canada threatened sanctions against Israel if it doesn't end the war, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hits back.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history. Now, these leaders may think that they're advancing peace. They're not. They're emboldening Hamas to continue fighting forever.
And of course, the complaints of those leaders had nothing to do with Hamas. It had everything to do with the people of Palestine. And you talk about baby killers. I don't think I need to tell you where the biggest violator of that goes in this conflict. But you see that more and more people are now willing to take out more. The fact that Mertz did that after those three, and he didn't give in to the, I'm sure that Netanyahu, well, actually, I'm not sure. Netanyahu so far hasn't come out directly and attacked Mertz. In fact, from the Israeli media today, we see this, Gary, if you can toss that headline up there. So far, what they're saying is they're kind of being measured. And this is from the German Israeli media, where it says some cabinet members are pushing for reoccupy Gaza, and Netanyahu is behind them politically. The question is whether the current course can be corrected. In this regard, Haaretz's article noted that German leaders need to stop declaring their responsibility for Israel's right to exist. Quote, their obligation, rather, is to question the way it exists, especially with German support, wrote Iskarov. A friend of Israel, Mertz, must choose between only going viral on Instagram or doing all he can to prevent the horrific killing of Palestinian children in Gaza, which Netanyahu has shown no intention to stop anytime soon. So far, the criticism from Israel has been somewhat muted, but the point there is pretty valid. It's one thing to go viral on Instagram and say something, but you got to do something too. Now, it's necessary to say something first, but what do you think is going to happen actually in tangible results?
Well, the trend is if you view it from the standpoint of getting help for the Palestinians, the trend is good because a growing number of countries are stepping up, speaking out and criticizing Israel now directly. Countries in the past wouldn't, and even taking symbolic action. I noticed that Ireland suspended all trade relations with Israel. Now, there's not much trade, so it's just a symbolic act, but more and more countries are lining up to do that. And it is the starvation of the people that has been, I think, the red line finally. You can blow them up, you can shoot them, you can run them over, but by God, don't let them starve. Don't let them be hungry. And, okay, if that's our red line that finally gets everybody enraged, good. But, the problem is the political divisions in Israel continue to grow and widen. The fracture is deepening. Yet, like 82% of the population, if you polled them on what are we going to do with the Palestinians, eliminate the Palestinians, that's 82% of the people.
Yeah, that was a shocking poll result. I saw that yesterday.
Yeah, so Israel's got a very deep moral crisis. Because the if you will, the philosophical idea of Israel was this place of justice and morality and law. And yet, Netanyahu lies about what the Palestinians did when he and his own government are killing, beheading children with bombs. They are killing tens of thousands, well, actually more than 60,000. Some made the number maybe upwards of 100,000 people. They've raped prisoners. They're starving people. The only thing they haven't done is line them up in a gas chamber and hit them with Zyklon B. That's the only thing these Israelis haven't done. Other than that, they would have been a complete imitation of Heinrich Himmler's crowd.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine it. And to understand a lot of the actual Holocaust survivors, there's still some out there, have been against this because they said it's what was done to us was barbaric and inhumane. Don't do the same to someone else in our name. That's one of the things they talk about a lot.
Yeah, I mean those survivors that are saying that they're 89, 90 years old. They're not younger than that.
Right.
But they remember what was done to them, and now they're seeing it again. Only the Israelis are doing it to these Palestinians.
Yeah, it's just gut wrenching, and there's no justification for it whatsoever. But it just does seem, though, that people are starting to pay attention, and I wonder if there's some correlation between what the three leaders did a week ago, what Merz did day before yesterday, and then what Trump did yesterday, because he was asked in the Oval Office what he's going to end up doing about the issue with Iran. And this is a quick background for some of our viewers. There has apparently been a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of angst, and even arguments between the U.S. and Israeli side over what to do about Iran. Israel clearly wants to attack Iran. They've been begging for this for a long time. They tried to get the Biden administration to green light an attack on Iran. They didn't do it. They've been trying to pressure Trump into doing it. And for one of the few times, Trump publicly announced yesterday that he is standing in opposition to Netanyahu, at least so far.
Did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Just last on sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him?
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now, because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong. I want it very strong, where we can go in with inspectors, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
Now, I was told recently by a source in Washington that has some access to some of these people, and they tell me that behind the scenes, Trump is absolutely adamant about not wanting to go down the military path. He's trying to find a way out of that, and I think it's one of the reasons why he hasn't done so far. But do you see this building pressure against Netanyahu and these atrocities that they're doing on the population of Palestine is maybe going to help Trump avoid that terrible outcome?
It should. Again, when we're dealing with Trump's submission to the Zionist lobby, it's always difficult to say, argue that he's going to stand firm against them, because I don't really think we can point to a case where he has rejected their advice or their pressure. The United States is right now taking steps militarily to engage Iran. The redeployment that took place of some of the B-2 bombers was replaced with a movement of B-52s and F-16s into
Diego Garcia.
Yeah, Diego Garcia. So there are some other things that I've learned that the military's basically been positioned and is ready to strike. So it really boils down to whether or not Trump is going to accept Iran's position that it will not give up the right to peaceful enrichment of uranium. They will retain the right to do 3.6 and then have in place a rock solid guarantee for.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the National Non-Proliferation Treaty, international law, gives every country the right to reprocess. So we don't have any legal standing to demand that they not do that. Is that accurate?
That's correct. But the other thing is, and the Trump's talked about, is trying to either inspect Iranian missiles or have some control over the missile force Iran has, as well as dictate who they can and cannot talk to with respect to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Now, those are non-negotiable points for Iran. They're not going to. They will negotiate on the uranium. They will, in fact, they signed, even when Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, they continued to abide by it, but the Europeans refused to lift the economic sanctions as required under that agreement. So Iran's been burned before, and so they're not looking to go in with a trust us, we'll treat you well kind of deal. They want some ironclad guarantees, but they're willing to give ironclad guarantees, which means allow on-site inspection, verifiable both by IAEA and, if necessary, even U.S. And maybe even Israeli inspectors. They'll say, "Hey, we got nothing to hide."
Yeah, well, we'll see if they end up doing that. But no matter what, I certainly hope that any kind of a conflict there is avoided. It would be just terrible for the U.S. interest. I mean, it could be deadly for the U.S. if we get into a war. I don't think that Trump realizes how vulnerable we are in the region to his Iranian counterattacks and missile attacks all throughout the Middle East. We're very, very vulnerable there. We don't need to find that out. And I hope that this momentum continues on. I mean, not even just for our own interests, which I'm obviously really keen in on, but also the Palestinian people, because it is just egregious that a whole category and a whole group of people are being methodically starved to death and pummeled to where they can't even do anything more than exist. And that is just egregious on a humanitarian, on a human being level. And I would like, if nothing else, to see all that come to an end by whatever means, whatever pressure can be brought to bear.
Well, and what's really damning of the West and of the United States, no one who wants to argue why the Palestinians are doing what they're doing, to try to present, if you will, there really is an other side to this story. Not only are you silenced in the United States, but then you're accused of anti-Semitism for trying to have a rational discussion. The real irony has been you've got non-Jews and even some who are atheists accusing Jews of being anti-Semitic. Jews who come out and speak out against what Israel is doing, against the Zionists. And, it's like, don't the people really that divorced from reality? They don't understand how sick and twisted this is, that non-Jews are accusing Jews of being anti-Semitic because those Jews condemn the genocidal behavior of these Zionists.
Yeah. No, they're not aware, is the bottom line there, because they can only see one viewpoint and everybody else is a bad guy and an enemy. And they can't. And it's hard for me to understand, and it's egregious to observe, but that certainly is the reality.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we can get rid of it, and there is apparently some positive momentum, you see these leaders here have been moved, the three European leaders, then you see Merz joining in with it, Trump now even being tepid with Israel and openly saying that I push back on this, which that hadn't happened in a long time either. So I think that all the movement on the groundswell of a lot of people in all these different countries being more and more vocal about it, even despite some of the pressure you mentioned where people label them an anti-Semite and all that kind of stuff, they're still rising up and saying things anyway. They're not being silenced. And I think that now the leaders are responding to that. So the more people start talking about the truth and what's really happening, the more that cumulatively we can actually have some impact. And I'm encouraged by that. I am.
Yeah. Oh, I share your optimism on that. And what's interesting is even Trump also has talked optimistically about possibility of a deal ceasefire for Gaza.
Yeah, yeah. I want to encourage that as well. Anything moving in that direction, we are all about. And but thanks very much for coming on today, Larry, as always. And for those who just can't get enough Larry, and it's probably all of us, go to sonar21.com where you can keep up to date with all the stuff Larry's got coming on. There's some good ones right there. The War Powers Act. I want to go see what that one's about because we seem to have lost it.
Yeah.
But yeah. That's a good one. Anything on there do you want to highlight before we let people go if they want to go look at something?
No, it's just I'm like a dairy farmer. I try to milk the cow every day.
Very good. All right. Well, we want people to go see that. And we look forward to having you on next week as we always do. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. And as a quick reminder, we're on podcast. So you have more than one way to get hold of your Daniel Davis Deep Dive Fix per day. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and you'll find us waiting there for you. Thank you very much, folks. And we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.